Hello, and welcome to Breast Cancer Conversations, a podcast brought to you by survivingbreastcancer.org. I am Laura Carfing, breast cancer survivor and founder of survivingbreastcancer.org, a nonprofit organization providing community, education, and resources to empower those diagnosed with breast cancer and their caregivers from day one and beyond. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to another episode of Breast Cancer Conversations. I am so excited that you guys are here. We have a fantastic two-part episode dropping today and tomorrow for you with the amazing Katrece Nolen. When her and I were recording the podcast, we had so much to talk about that I ended up having to actually break it up into two parts. Today, we dive into Katrece's compelling story with inflammatory breast cancer. Diagnosed in her late 30s, Katrece began with a simple observation of asymmetry in her breast. This led her to seek medical attention. Despite initial challenges getting a timely appointment, her persistence paid off when she was diagnosed with inflammatory breast cancer, also known as IBC, a rare and aggressive form of breast cancer. Katrece details the rigorous treatments she went through, including chemotherapy, surgery, and radiation. She also highlights the emotional and logistical challenges of managing a cancer diagnosis while raising 3 young children. Katrece's story is a powerful reminder of the importance of self-advocacy. In part 2, dropping tomorrow, we will celebrate Katrece's survivorship of 11 plus years and what survivorship and surveillance looks like for those living with a diagnosis of inflammatory breast cancer.
It's like that little simple thing of just scheduling an appointment could have been the difference between life and death.
Welcome to the conversation.
So good morning, everyone. Thank you, Laura, for having me. My name is Katrece Nolen, and I'm calling in from Northern Virginia. I'm definitely excited to share my story and how my story relates to hopefully advances that we're making to address cancer disparities in the breast cancer community.
Tell me a little bit about your personal experience with breast cancer.
So my personal experience began in my late 30s. Did not have any knowledge of any family history of breast cancer, but it just so happens at the time my youngest son was 3 years old. We were calling on the floor, just resting a little bit. And I just happened to look down in my shirt and noticed that one breast seemed to be slightly larger than the other. I asked my husband, "Hey, do you see a difference?" He's like, "Nope. Okay, keep playing. Life is happening." But later that night, I was standing in front of the mirror, and I definitely knew that there was a difference. And when I asked my husband again, he also said yes, he noticed the difference. So then I woke up that morning, first thing, 8 o'clock on the dot, I'm calling the doctor's office, my family doctor, asking to come in and be seen. And my doctor wasn't there, my regular doctor. And they asked me if I wanted to wait until she returned. And I said, no, I think I need to be seen today. And so I did go in, met a new doctor. Hi, hello. Hey, something's going on with my breast. I did a breast self-exam. I did not feel a lump. And so he did the same thing and said, you know what? I don't feel a lump either, but I do, like you, notice it's warm to the touch, that one breast. So he asked me if I had, nursed our children. And I said, yes. In fact, my son was 3. But I had nursed him until he was 6 months old. And he said, well, you know what? This symptom, swelling, warmness to the touch, makes me think of something like mastitis. Mastitis is an infection that you commonly get after when you're breastfeeding. Perhaps there's a clogged milk duct or something. And he's like, but that's odd that would be the case because you said you've nursed over a year ago. It's been almost 2 years. So they said to be cautious, let's order an MRI. I'm sorry, not MRI, a mammogram if you're okay with it. I said, yes, absolutely. Let's take it. Let's do it. So we could just rule out anything. And he said, you know what? These symptoms are not normal. So even if the results come out, clear, here's a card for a local breast surgeon. I recommend that you perhaps at least just get monitored by them, just as a precautionary measure.
Sounds like this doctor was really proactive and just saying like, this is not normal. I have some reservations. Let's start getting some tests done.
Absolutely. But nothing, the word breast cancer didn't come up in the conversation, but let's go to the mammogram. So I did the mammogram with that swollen breast, my very first time having one. Remember, I wasn't 40. So That was not one of the standard things to do under age 40 with no family history. So I had that exam done. When I came out, they read the report and they said they don't see anything, just perhaps maybe some thickening of the skin. So, went to the doctor, had the mammogram. Nothing's going on. The doctor did prescribe some antibiotics in case it was mastitis. So I just went and picked up the meds and continued on. Fast forward, less than 2 weeks later, standing in front of the same mirror, I was actually trying to button my shirt and it had swollen so much that I couldn't button my shirt. And so that's when, a little bit of panic settled into my mind. I remember that card he gave me of the breast surgeon. I found it rather quickly. Again, that morning, 8 a.m., I placed the call, letting them know. I'd seen my doctor. He referred me to you guys. I would really think I need to be seen. And the doctor's name that was on there, they looked up her schedule and said, well, this is about, mid-March, early March, and they would not have any availability until the April timeframe. And I said, well, it's been a couple weeks since I saw my doctor. It has swollen up to the point I can't button my shirt. Something is not right. I think I need to be seen sooner rather than later. I don't think I could wait till April to be seen. And so she again repeated that they weren't available. So there was like this pregnant pause in this conversation, right? Scheduling assistant. And I'm thinking this scheduler is like holding me back from what I know I need to have is to be seen by the doctor. So I said, well, okay, well, are there any other doctors in the practice? Maybe there's somebody else that could see me. She said, oh, yes, there are. Okay, can you look at their
Oh my gosh.
schedules?
Like,
right? I was about to say, if I look back on it now, like I could have hung up the phone and waited to the April appointment and I could not be here. It's like that little simple thing of just scheduling an appointment could have been the difference between life and death. But I stayed on the phone and I asked that question. They did. And lo and behold, they had someone available that week. I was like, oh, okay. Like I know she heard my impassioned plea to be seen, but I don't know. I don't know why, right? Why that I had to come up with a solution to be seen by a doctor when I explained in detail what was going on. But thankfully I
or to
did.
even offer you the option, right? Like, would you be willing to see somebody else? Let me see,
Yes.
like, yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay.
The simple questions, the simple things. It's like the simple things that matter in life. So I was able to get in. It was a Thursday that I got in to see the doctor. They told me to bring my mammogram report. And so I walked in, I checked in, I had a CD of the mammogram. I handed it and turned it into the receptionist, checked in. I sat back down. I was the only one in the office because it was a later appointment. It was about 4:00. Sat down and they called me back up to the front. She said, well, Mrs. Nolen, do you have the mammogram film? Because you turned in a CD. I said, yeah, they gave me a CD. I said, here it is. Well, we need to have the mammogram film in order to see you today. And so I was like, okay, so no one told me about the mammogram film. It just said, bring the mammogram information. And I was like, okay, well, let's see. The radiologist is right on the corner. Can I just drive over there real quick and pick up the film and run back over here? It'll still be before you close. I'm looking around. There's nobody else in the office. No, man, we're going to have to reschedule you. Yes, your face was my face.
Yes, and for our listeners, like my face is like jaw dropping, like what? Like, yes.
Right? I was like, we're not here again, are we? This is what I was thinking in my mind. I remained calm. I was like, ma'am, if they don't have the film, I would like to see the doctor at a minimum for a consultation. I said, if I need to pay out of pocket, I will. If y'all don't want to file insurance, that's okay. I don't have a problem. I need to be seen today. Well, man, we have to have that film. If you don't have the film, we can't see you today. And I don't think, you won't be able to make it back in time. So that was like, third plea. So I said, okay, well, is there an office manager present? I need to speak to the office manager. I don't know how I knew about office managers, but I knew that there's a chain of command in the doctor's office. So I was like, can I speak to the office manager? And she said, okay, well, have you speak to the office manager, right? That what I offered up. I had to ask. Again, I had to
Right.
ask.
Yeah.
So the office manager comes out. We go back into her desk, small space. And she's going back and forth again with me also about the fact the doctor can't see me because I need to have mammogram film. I was like, of all the time we have wasted
Mm-hmm.
talking about this mammogram film, the doctor could have seen me and I'm like, she'd be checked out by now. I said, ma'am, I'm not leaving today until I see the doctor. And so we're just back and forth. We're at this stalemate. In walks a doctor into the office manager's office. She had on a white coat. She had a manila envelope underneath her arm. She said, hi, Ms. Nolen. I understand you are one of my patients today. And she then described why she needed to have mammogram film because their technology for reading the CD at the time, their monitors were not upgraded enough to be able to see the distinct differences in the CD.
Mm.
Remember, this is back 2013, so it has been a time.
Sure.
And so that's why we need to have the film, she said. But looking at your information in the folder, knowing when you had the film, and now that I'm looking at you, I believe you might have inflammatory breast cancer.
Mm.
Office manager's office, fighting to be seen. She hadn't even seen me yet, right?
Wow.
She just at least looked at the information. And it just turns out that inflammatory breast cancer, she had me come in the next day. I had a skin biopsy because inflammatory breast cancer can present itself in the skin. That was on a Friday. She said, I will call you. You won't have to come back in to learn the results. So on a Monday afternoon, on my way back from work, I got the call from her saying that, yes, in fact, there is cancer present in the skin. And I'm going to have to come back in the next day. Looking back, it turns out that inflammatory breast cancer, it is not detectable via mammogram. It starts at stage 3. And so I look back on the conversation, I think, how many more people don't know enough about inflammatory breast cancer to know that that lady that you just heard saying she has swelling of the breast and that there's a mammogram, that conversation, the mammogram, wasn't even worth it.
Right. Right.
So I was able to go through a series of tests. You actually confirm inflammatory breast cancer through a MRI and a punch biopsy. And it was those 2 tests that I had within a week or so
What
later.
is a punch biopsy?
So punch biopsy, they'll take what looks like a gun, and it has a large needle on it, and they'll point it towards your breast, and they shoot it, and it punches into your breast, and it pulls out a skin sample of the cancer. And so they're able to take that skin sample and through pathology, be able to look at it and confirm that it is inflammatory breast cancer, in fact. So I did go through inflammatory breast cancer, the procedure, the way in which you're able to treat it. You have to first start with chemotherapy. It's very important that you do not go start with surgery. And so you have to have a doctor who knows that it is inflammatory breast cancer and what the challenges are with it. After the chemotherapy, it's then follow up with surgery. During the surgery, they actually, and I think this is with some of the other breast cancers as well, at least for inflammatory breast cancer, because it's in the skin, chemotherapy shrinks it. The surgery, they try to get rid of it. But during the surgery, they keep you open. They have a coordination with pathology to see whether or not there's enough margins left in the skin to actually close it up, because they have to rid the skin of the cancer. And then following that, within 6 weeks to the date when you're first able to, they have to start radiation as quickly as possible. And there's about 30 to 33 rounds of radiation that you have to undergo. So all 3 of those occurred between March of 2023 is when I was diagnosed, all the way until November. I'm sorry, not 2023, November of 2013. So in the span of that 8 months is the time it took for the treatment. At the time, married, working, had just turned 38 years old, and ours actually just turned 39 years old, and our kids at the time were ages 3, 7, and 11. So
Wow.
preschool, third grade, and sixth grade. So that was our kids' experience that year.
Wow. Thank you so much for like going back in time to tell us that story. I know every time we share our stories of being diagnosed, like it kind of feels like yesterday, the moment that you hear the word cancer, the advocacy that we have to do just to be seen, and the burden I think that it puts on us as patients. And I'm really so glad that we're talking about inflammatory breast cancer because it affects, a smaller portion. Is it about like 5% of those diagnosed with breast cancer are inflammatory? And I think a lot of times with education, we always say like, oh, do your self breast exam. This is what it feels like to feel a lump, et cetera. And that's totally great that we're advocating for that. But I think you're bringing up such a good point that breast cancer doesn't always present itself with a lump and that we need to be able to understand other types of symptoms or lack thereof in terms of symptoms, but making sure that we get the right screening and the right screening modality to detect whether we have cancer or not. And so you're touching on so many great points that we're going to dive into a little bit more in today's conversation. Very similarly, in my story, I was also diagnosed in my 30s and didn't have, in your 30s, just as you were mentioning too, my very first mammogram was a diagnostic mammogram. And I also had to advocate for myself. Granted, mine was hormonal positive and HER2 positive, not inflammatory. But I was working out at the gym and I was, wearing one of those like tight, cute shirts. I'm in the mirror, pumping my iron, doing all that stuff. And over time, I noticed that my breast also started being different sizes. Like one pectoral muscle was developing more than the other. And I'm like, this does not seem right. And in fact, it was when I was like bending over or getting dressed or doing other types of things, I noticed dimpling on my skin. And so again, just another form where it's almost like the cancer was pulling in the skin where like the dimpling, I think they use the analogy that it looks like an orange peel or like a lemon peel, et cetera. And so just knowing some of these other symptoms can be
Absolutely.
incredibly helpful. And, I think also being under 40 for you and I both, it's, we're too young to get cancer. There's no family history. We weren't being screened. And so I really appreciate this rich conversation of letting our listeners know, like understanding that we just need to advocate for ourselves. We know our body's the best. And it's really unfortunate that there are these systems in place that provide these barriers for us to even get access to the treatments and the screening modalities, et cetera. So thank goodness that, I mean, I just love that the sentence that you said where it's like, if it's inflammatory, mammography isn't the right modality for you. So I think that is like, baseline. So then from there, we have to go and get other types of screenings that you're mentioning, MRI, and then that punch biopsy. I also think it's interesting too, because a lot of times when we're thinking about treatment, we're thinking about surgery to get the cancer out immediately. Because I was HER2 positive, I also had chemotherapy first. And so inflammatory having chemotherapy first to try and shrink the tumor is really helpful. And then I think it gives our oncologists an opportunity to say, did the treatment work? Was there a response? And what percentage of response did we have? Like 100% complete response, or was there some residual cancer left over? And so how was going through chemotherapy, having, 3 children and all different ages, talking to your family and managing that? Can you talk a little bit about what that experience was like?
So for us, we have friends, we have no family nearby. And so for us, it was a matter of, having to communicate to our community, you know,
Mhm.
our community of supporters to let them know what was going on and how they can help. And so, very first thing our parents knew, we told them what was going on. So their very first thing was like, okay, when do we need to get there? So our
Yeah.
family, I'm in Northern Virginia, but my family's in Oklahoma, and then
Oh,
my
okay.
husband's family was in Tennessee. So there was that coordination of, okay, well, who's going to be here, but not having everyone here. because, having everybody here is a little bit overwhelming, right?
Absolutely.
Not
Absolutely.
everybody can come at one moment. So, first up was my mom and dad, right?
Mhm.
Their daughter, they're gonna come. They want to lay eyes on me. But before they came, we had to let the kids know what was going on. And so, we actually decided that we were going to tell the kids up front. So we had a family meeting. I can remember we were in that same family room where I was crawling on the floor. We were, sitting on the couch, all the kids lined up. And so my husband opened up with the conversation, hey, we want to have a family meeting, because
Mhm.
we want to talk about some things that are going on. Your mom has has been diagnosed with cancer, and try to describe a little bit about what cancer was. Obviously, the 3-year-old didn't know what it was, but he was there for the conversation. So, he's
Yeah.
14 now. And when he asks questions, yeah, you were right there. We were talking about this. Right?
Yeah,
So he's
right.
like,
But to have the
okay.
support of the siblings too, right? Like the older siblings, I think that's great.
Yes, but so the older two were more familiar with it because at their daycare they were attending, it was what was called Fitwise for Kids aftercare. Their owner actually did have family history of breast cancer. And
Oh.
so they would have annual outreach activities to one, outreach to community members about the different support that were available. And they had the kids kind of like a caring campaign.
Mm.
I learned a little bit about the fact that some people get sick with something called cancer, specifically that her mother had breast cancer. And they would make these tiles, pink and white tiles, each of the kids would draw and make.
Oh.
So the girls had actually just been through that experience the prior year. So they knew a little bit, that that's what it was. Mommy's going to get sick. And we described what sick was going to be, that, I was
Mm.
going to be losing my hair. And so that's when they would notice for sure that I was going through treatment and that there'd be sometimes that I would be weak and, tired, but, that I still love them and that, we're going to make the best of the situation regardless. We also, thankfully, with the local cancer center in our community, regardless of whether or not you're being treated there, they actually had community support services. One of those being a um, program for youth whose
Oh,
parents were undergoing cancer treatment.
amazing.
Yeah, so we enrolled the two older girls in that. They went for 6 weeks, once a week. They learned about cancer. They learned about what mommies or daddies were going through. They learned about sharing their feelings about what they were feeling during that time. That they weren't the only one. There were other kids that were in the room that were
Exactly.
going
Yeah.
through a similar experience. And so our middle child is a just finished her freshman year in college, and she, we talked about over the years, she still remembers going to that because one of the descriptions she remembers rather vividly is about how cancer, when they're treating it, are like weeds in a garden.
Mm. Mhm.
Flowers are really pretty, but then sometimes you want to get rid of some of the weeds that are in the midst of the garden. And
Yep.
so sometimes those weeds grow rather fast and rather tall. And so they pull it out. Well, my middle child, she was always tall growing up. So she can remember, and I can remember hearing other people say, "Oh, you're growing so fast. You're growing as fast as
Oh.
a weed." And my daughter was like, "Mm-mm, nope, don't
That's
say that. I'm not a weed." And
yes.
so,
Wow. Powerful.
uh,
Yeah.
absolutely. So so that's evidence that that particular program worked. It was effective, um,
Mhm.
and so it was just a matter of sharing and information. And I think, that's what I kind of, as an advocate, that's what I'm really passionate about. Is that if I had not shared, again, there's like these different junctures throughout treatment
Mhm.
where, okay, if I hadn't done that, if I had not done that, where would I be today? Would I be here? And one of those critical moments was because my biggest challenge in the beginning was getting over the fact that I was diagnosed. But quickly thereafter, it was, oh my goodness, how can I do this to my kids?
Right. Right.
Right. I thought, like, I'm just putting myself in their shoes at their ages. what would have been, what would it have felt like if, my mother had been diagnosed with something like this? And
Right.
so I felt like at the time I was almost like taking part of their childhood away. Like, how could I be introducing something so critical at this juncture? But
Yeah.
obviously, I had no control over that, so it was definitely a trying time. So because of that, I actually spoke and reached out to all their teachers, deans, principals. Hey, it's
Hmm.
on. I need you guys to be observant of my
Yes.
children. If you see anything that's going on, please let us know. And it was one of those conversations with the dean at my oldest child's school. Turns out she was also a breast cancer survivor. And when she heard the type of diagnosis I had, she's like, Katrece, I've actually heard of that before. We actually have another mom at the school who
Oh,
is diagnosed
wow.
with the same type of cancer. Whoa, rare cancer. You talked about it,
Yes.
right?
Hmm.
Maybe 5% of the population. And there's another mom in my child's school who had just gone through the same thing less than 2 years before.
Yeah.
So she offered to connect us, and she did. And it's just opened up this whole world of other survivors I was able to meet
Yes.
of inflammatory breast cancer, at least almost 500 of us throughout the country.
I remember being in Boston, I thought it would be so easy to find people diagnosed, young people diagnosed with breast cancer. I thought they'd be coming out of the weeds, wanting to get coffee with me, wanting to chat, because I wanted to see someone a year out or 5 years out. I wanted to see that hope. And unless you belonged to that specific hospital or institution, you didn't have access to those services, right? So, like, depending on where you're treated at, your hospital may or may not have a support group. They may or may not have complementary, like holistic acupuncture or other types of care, et cetera, which I thought was kind of crazy, which is kind of what gave me the impetus to start survivingbreastcancer.org, because I really wanted to bring communities together and to leverage technology and virtual programming so that people, no matter where they are, they're not going to a like major cancer research institute. If they're in rural areas, if they have the internet connection, they can still get these resources. And so, one thing, exactly what you were saying, to meet someone with inflammatory breast cancer is so powerful. We actually started, I think going on our third year now, like, so about 2 years ago, we started a support group specifically for inflammatory breast cancer. They meet twice a month. It's professionally moderated. And I remember the very first session we hold it over Zoom. People were like crying because they've never felt like they've never seen somebody with their type of diagnosis. And so that, I think, I mean, I would love to invite you to come to our world as well and just like meet these women, because I think your story is so powerful to be, 11 plus years out from your diagnosis, which is the hope that we need. It's the hope that it's like, okay, this is aggressive, it's rare, but there are people who are living very long, fulfilling lives. So I just wanted to share that with you. And then anecdotally, talking about children, I think, we've talked a lot about, and I definitely want to invite you back on the podcast as well, but we've talked a lot to like parents, and then also asking their now adult children to come on the podcast and kind of sharing like how are they managing hearing when they find out that their mom was sick or that their mom had cancer, et cetera. And I think anecdotally, we always hear, I'm glad they told us. I think a lot of times we want to protect our children and just keep them like, okay, like, let's not talk about this, or let's not talk about this in front of them. And that can be incredibly isolating. And so I would say literally 100% of the people that we've spoke to, the children are like, my mom kept me informed. She shared with me that they didn't have all the answers, but when they had answers, they would, call the family meetings and update us. And so I just think to share that piece of like, how can I help support my children? Because cancer, yes, it's happening to us as the patient, but it's happening to everyone around us as well. And how hard it can be for our loved ones, caregivers, family members, colleagues at work, people in our churches and our communities to see us go through something. And so people react to that very differently as well.
Absolutely get inspired every time I'm able to connect with someone who has IBC, or even talk to someone who feels like, oh, I got these symptoms. I've read about your story or heard your story, Katrece,
Yeah.
and some of my story symptoms are similar, but it's been difficult for me to be seen. Right? Someone actually messaged me on talk about technology. Everyone knows about my story. It's all out there. So I get messages, quite often. And one of them just a couple weeks ago, a lady in outside Dallas, Texas, was just, hey, just pouring out everything, right? Like, here's
Mm.
what's going on. the doctors are not listening to me. What do I need to do? And so, the fact that you have that community that's able to, just share and exchange information, the use of
Yeah.
technology in this thing, oh my goodness, it just can 10x the ability for someone to get the right treatment, right? Because,
Mm-hmm.
like you said, the fact of there's a type of cancer, there's a type of treatment that's required for it. And I remember in the group that I was in for IBC, that there are so many women that it turns out by the time they got into the group, some of them were not being given the right treatment protocols
Oh, wow.
because they were at, not maybe at a cancer center or a, doctor's office that was familiar with it, trying to be aggressive, rushing, and going
Mm-hmm.
straight into the surgery piece.
Sure.
It can have devastating consequences. And yes, my children, they definitely know they definitely know about the cancer, and they still know about it today because obviously I'm talking to people about it. And so they're just like, it's like almost like nothing to them, but I know they pay attention. Um,
Yes.
and I know that hopefully because of that experience, they're much more well equipped, but also it's at a junction where, they're getting into their, you know, so I was diagnosed between age 38 and 39. That means
Mm-hmm.
when those girls hit between the age of 28, 29, they're going to have to be monitored,
Yeah.
right? Because of them being, they say monitor 10 years before your closest relative was diagnosed. So it's definitely a reality that is going to be much more sooner or earlier for them than it
Sure.
was for me.
Did you end up doing any genetic testing?
I had genetic testing. I've actually done it twice now. So in these 11 years, I had it done at the very beginning. They did not see anything, that has any predisposition for
Yeah.
breast cancer. And my doctor then encouraged it again, perhaps like 5, 6 years ago, because she's like, hey, technology and
Yes. They're
science
finding more
was
more
finding
genes.
more.
Yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate her having that conversation with me. And we did it again. Actually, I've done it 3 times. One through a clinical trial that I
Okay.
had when after I was diagnosed, I had started treatment, but then I found that group and I found out there's actually doctors who are experts in inflammatory breast cancer. And so, given my experience I had trying to get to be seen by a doctor, I was like, you know what? Let me go find an expert, just to verify that the treatment that I was undergoing was the proper treatment, that it was aggressive, enough,
Mm-hmm.
given that the type of cancer I had was very aggressive. So we actually picked up the family. It was around the summertime. Our school was about to be out. And we rolled up to Philadelphia, which was just about a 3-hour drive or so from Northern Virginia, to go see the doctor. His name is Dr. Massimo Cristofanelli, and he's probably like one of the grandfathers of IBC. I was so blessed to be able to, connect with him. He actually started the very first IBC clinic at
Mm.
MD Anderson. And so he then moved on, and he was at the time, Thomas Jefferson, and now he's in Boston. But I did meet him, very personal person. So you think of an expert, and you're like, oh, as an expert, they're not going to be able to talk to people.
Right. Right.
He absolutely was able to talk to us, calm us, talk to my husband and I. It was like almost meeting like a family friend. So, finding a doctor that knows how to communicate, oh my goodness,
Yeah.
it's powerful. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I really think that is a huge challenge that many of us face today.
Absolutely.
Our doctors
Absolutely.
that can communicate. Yes, they know the sciences, but there's a couple things that perhaps are missing that curriculum that need to be updated when it comes to
I know.
communicating with diverse patient populations. Meeting him, he was able to express, yes, you're on the right treatment protocols. He did look at, all the data that we shared. He did express the desire that the chemotherapy that I was undergoing, that it needed to be a little bit more aggressive.
Mm.
More aggressive? He's like, yes. He's like, with inflammatory breast cancer, you need to hit it with everything you have. He said, because in this instance, it's almost like you don't have a second chance. your chance is your
Wow.
one chance, and you gotta hit it. And so came back with that information back to my family oncology doctor, and she expressed some concern about it. That's when I learned a little bit about the connection between breast cancer treatment, chemotherapy, and the heart.
Ah,
She was sharing how, when it comes to chemotherapy, obviously it's a poison, and there's a lifetime limit. And she said, I prescribed them out that, given that you do have an aggressive type of cancer, should you have a recurrence, you need to have an option available, perhaps a chemotherapy to do it again. And that lifetime limit part, she's like, why we did all those tests before we actually started chemotherapy. We had, your heart, EKG, all those exams. I'm thinking like, okay, I've had those types of things before other surgeries. But the reason why they had it was because they needed to know what was your baseline, how strong was your heart, to be
mm-hmm.
able to want to take the medication. And then, for survivorship purposes, be able to look at the difference in your heart then vice now, maybe 10
Sure,
years later.
sure.
And now there's all these studies now about, cardiology, oncology cardiology,
Yes.
because there's so many more of us surviving this thing
Yes.
years
Yes.
out. And, at the time when you're being treated, you're like, I don't care about 10 years out. I just need to live
Right,
now.
right. Like I need to live. And then you're absolutely right that now, unfortunately, because we've had such hard toxicity through our system, that new issues bubble up.
Yes, they do. And so she expressed concern. He had a recommendation. And I think, okay, well, I got that second opinion. I appreciate her being open to me getting a second opinion. And
Hmm.
something she said to me, I actually put in my book, was that, if you say to the doctor that you want a second opinion and they express concern about you seeking opinion, she's like, you need to go find another doctor.
Yes, absolutely.
She was way open to it. She was like, yes, absolutely. Go get that second opinion. I'd love to hear what they have to say. I was like, that's the response.
That's awesome. That's really
I
great. Yes.
love. But at the time, there was some disagreement. I was like, hey, you know what? You guys have been oncologists, study this thing. I'm not an expert, but I need you guys to talk. So I need you to pick up the phone, have a conversation, and then come
Yeah.
back and tell me what you all agreed to do. And they did
Yes.
that.
That's amazing.
And so I did have that additional dose. Turns out it was really strong because, oh my goodness, I had some definite extreme side effects. Found out I had vertigo or
Wow.
perhaps an induced vertigo. I don't know, but it was it was true about hitting something like it's an elephant. It hit me
Yeah.
pretty hard. And so we went through that, finished up that treatment. But I would say, yes, the chemotherapy was the toughest part, not only physically, but also emotionally, right?
Absolutely.
We had a hair cutting ceremony. Um,
Hmm.
I actually still have pictures today, and I actually have a picture of me and my son. He was, 3 years old, and bald mom next to him, and he's touching my head. Mommy, you look like me. I was
Oh, I love that. I love that.
like, in my case, I had like braids in my hair, and so like you said, the long hair,
Yeah. Yeah.
it hurt. It was starting to hurt, like because it was like kind of pulling on the scalp. I was like, okay, we got to get this out of here because this is not working. And so I just up one day, we're in the family room, and I was like, okay, it's time. They're like, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's time. Everybody gather around. We're about to do this thing. And so
Awesome.
everyone gathered around. My parents, the kids actually got to cut a lock each. This was
Nice. So
not the
to include them in the
3-year-old.
process and everything. So, yep.
Yes, not the 3-year-old, but it was like it made it real for them.
Yeah.
Right, like, up until that point, it was like, "Okay, family's here, yeah, mom's going to the doctor," but, it doesn't seem like it's much of any difference other than the food is improved because grandma's cooking cooking breakfast every morning, like, mom didn't do that every day, but my
Yeah.
grandma did.
Sign me up.
Right? But
Yeah.
once that happened, it was like, I could see, like, looking up at mom's head, like, "Okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's a little different, yeah?"
Tangible
But
now. Yeah.
mhm. And then, them not wanting to have to explain things either, right? So I had to be conscious of that. When we did go out, I went ahead and wore a wig.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of cases it was just wearing a wig, so you would have to explain what
Yeah,
was going on, right?
exactly.
Like you said, you're reliving it with every single person.
Hmm.
And then for the kids, for them not have to explain it either. Walking around the house, I was bald as,
Absolutely. Yeah.
bald as day.
Yeah.
But when I'd go out, I would either do that or, and sometimes the scarf because that wig was
It was
hot.
so hot. Yeah. I think I had one of those like baseball caps that had like the fake hair underneath. And so like that was kind of fun. I was like, oh, let me just put on my cap today. Like,
Oh yes,
but
you just don't realize how it's so fun. It's like, how am I not hot with my regular hair? But I put that wig on. It's like burning hot in the
oh,
summertime.
totally. And itchy and uncomfortable. And there's like nothing good about it. Katrece, thank you so much for spending this afternoon with me, sharing your story with inflammatory breast cancer and the heartbreak that we have to, as patients, really need to advocate for ourselves. Yes, as much as we say like the burden shouldn't fall on us, it does so often. And I am so glad that you were able to keep asking for that appointment so that way you got a proper diagnosis that could be treated. For all of you guys listening to this episode, please tune in tomorrow, the next episode on Breast Cancer Conversations. We're going to continue the conversation with Katrece, celebrating her survivorship at the date of this recording, 11 plus years, which is absolutely amazing with inflammatory breast cancer. So that'll be dropping tomorrow. Stay tuned. And thank you, everyone, for listening to our show. I would like to acknowledge that all of the information on our podcast are from personal experiences and are not a substitute for professional medical advice. You should always contact your medical care team. If you're looking for specific topics or would like to be a guest on our show, please feel free to reach out to me. My email is laura@survivingbreastcancer.org. Until next time, keep on thriving.